A man walked into a small-town museum and saw his own skeleton on display. The air inside the museum was thick with the scent of old paper and something metallic, like cold iron. He could hear the faint, rhythmic drip of water somewhere in the dark corridors, a sound that seemed to sync with the pounding in his chest. Reaching out, his fingers brushed the cold glass of the display case, and a sticky residue clung to his skin. A primal dread took hold as he noticed the skeleton's left wrist bore the same distinctive scar he'd had since childhood. From the shadows behind him, a whisper, so faint it was almost a thought. "We've been waiting for you." The floorboards groaned under a weight that wasn't his, and the smell of damp earth and ozone suddenly filled the room. Paralyzed by the unknown, he realized the town outside had fallen into an absolute, watchful quiet. An elderly man gazes directly into the camera, his eyes wide with unspoken terror. The camera pulls back to reveal the mist-veiled village square of Stonehaven, dominated by a peculiar, cage-like structure at its center. For 2 centuries, the villagers have kept the bones of a stranger entombed within that cage, and they feed it, they pray to it, and if you ask them why, they'll tell you it's to keep you safe. Our story doesn't start with the bones. It starts with a couple, Sarah and Mark, from Portland. Seeking a scenic detour on their Colorado road trip, their GPS suggested a more picturesque route through the remote, pine-forested valleys of the Rockies. That was their first and most fateful mistake. The air grew heavy with the scent of damp earth and ozone, a metallic tang clinging to the back of the throat. A deep, unnatural quiet settled over the valley, broken only by the faint, irregular scratching of branches against the car's roof. Sarah, her phone's lens capturing the blur of passing pines, narrated with an optimism that felt increasingly misplaced. Mark's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his silence a stark contrast to her cheerful commentary. "The map shows a tiny town called Stonehaven just ahead," she continued, the device casting a pale glow on her face. "Probably has the world's best pie shop," she added, her voice bright, unaware of the heavy, damp air beginning to press against the windows. Adventure time! Stonehaven wasn't on most maps. It existed in a fold of the mountains, forgotten by time. As they rolled past the "Welcome to Stonehaven" sign, the scent of damp earth and old rot seeped into the car. The 142 sign loomed ahead, but Sarah sensed it first. Not fear, but a suffocating stillness. It was the dense, damp silence of a place smothered under a heavy blanket. The air grew thick and cold, carrying the faint, metallic scent of wet earth and decay. Every sound was swallowed whole, leaving only the heavy weight of anticipation in its wake. The car eased into the village, where quaint cottages stood with unnervingly perfect gardens. Yet an absolute stillness hung in the air. No residents, no movement, not even a pet stirring. The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with a faint, metallic tang, like old pennies. It was a postcard scene, stripped of all its life. Every curtain was drawn tight, sealing the windows like closed eyelids. Mark's voice dropped to a whisper. World's best pie shop might be closed forever. The air hung heavy with the faint, metallic scent of rust and something sweetly decayed. "This place is a ghost town," Mark murmured, his breath catching in his throat. Sarah cut through the stillness, her voice sharp with focus. "Number. Look." They arrived at the center, a perfect square that felt more like a trap than a destination. The town square was a flawless circle of cobblestones, so clean it seemed untouched by time or weather. The air carried a faint, metallic scent like cold iron, and the stones felt damp and slick underfoot. Every surface gleamed with an impossible perfection, as if the entire square had been scrubbed clean of all life and history. And there, at the very heart of it all, sat the shrine. It was not a statue, but a wrought iron gazebo, its bars twisting and curving inward to form a skeletal cage. Where a roof should have been, the metal ribs met overhead, sealing the space within. And inside, arranged with a grotesque, almost reverent precision upon a stone slab, lay a complete human skeleton. Beneath the iron-gray sky, the structure gleamed with a sickly ivory pallor. At its base lay fresh daisies and a single, perfect apple offerings that felt chillingly recent. Sarah and Mark moved closer, their morbid curiosity overriding any instinct for horror. The skeleton within was ancient, the ironwork crumbling with rust, yet the scent of damp earth and sweet fruit hung in the still air. The body was only hours old. Mark squinted through the rain, his voice barely a whisper. Some kind of historical reenactment thing? A plague doctor? Sarah knelt beside a bronze plaque, her fingers tracing the engraved letters as she read aloud. "The Guardian." The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and wet earth, and a deep, resonant hum began to vibrate through the stone beneath. 1823. Our thanks, our feast, our fear, as Sarah whispered. Here, a warped wooden door groaned to open on rusted hinges. John emerged, a man in his 70s, his posture unnaturally rigid, his smile a thin, mirthless line. "Afternoon," he said, his voice carrying the faint, metallic scent of old rain on iron. We'd strayed from the path, disoriented in the oppressive stillness. Sarah's voice, thin with confusion, broke the quiet. "Oh, hi, we were just..." Her words faltered, replaced by a sharp inhalation. What is this? The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and damp earth, a metallic tang catching at the back of the throat. John's reply was a low, gravelly whisper, devoid of all warmth. That's the guardian. Keeps the mist at bay. Mark. The mist? John. The mist from the woods. John. The one that forgets things. It's that feeling of your bones settling into their rightful place. Our town suffered a terrible sickness a long time ago. A creeping amnesia where people forgot their own names, their own histories. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and forgotten things. And then he arrived. The stranger remained, lingering as a permanent, unsettling reminder. John's explanation flowed like a rehearsed parable, smooth as a river stone worn by time. A faint scent of ozone and damp earth permeated the air around him. His words carried a weight that made the very atmosphere feel thick and heavy. The mist was more than just weather. It was a living metaphor for the town's deepest fears and losses. It clung to the skin like a cold, damp shroud, carrying the faint metallic scent of ozone and decay. This was no mere superstition. It was a palpable dread that whispered through the pines and settled in the bones. To speak of it was to invite its silent, watchful presence into your home. He offered them a night at his sister's bed and breakfast. Stay, he urged. See, we're just regular people. But his gaze kept darting toward the tree line, where a dense, unnatural fog began twisting through the pines. That evening, at the cozy B&B, the air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and something faintly metallic. Every creak of the old floorboards seemed amplified, and a cold draft seeped through the walls, carrying the faint sound of whispering from the woods. His earlier reassurance now felt hollow, a thin veil over the primal dread that had settled in the room. The food was rich and savory, and Eleanor's hospitality felt genuinely warm. But her rules carried an unsettling weight. Don't go out after dark, she'd say, her tone dropping. The mountain roads, they're not just treacherous. Then came the stranger command. Your shoes go by the door, toes facing out. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a ritual, whispered with the scent of wood smoke and something faintly metallic hanging in the air. An old habit. Sarah, sleepless, gazed through the window. Below, townsfolk gathered silently in the square, their movements slow and deliberate. They placed fresh offerings before the skeleton. A coarse loaf, a tarnished silver coin. No prayers were whispered. Only the heavy, expectant air of ritual hung between them. They listened, as if waiting for it to speak. Sarah leans in, her whisper barely disturbing the heavy air. This isn't a memorial. Her voice is a thread of ice. It's a ritual. They're feeding it. Mark dismissed it as just another strange local custom, like keeping a town mascot. Then a low, mournful sound echoed from the woods. Not an animal, but like wine through a hollow pot. The air thickened with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like old pennies. At that exact moment, the lamp flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging the room into darkness. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. In that instant of complete blackness, the skeleton on the stone slab appeared to shift, its silhouette rising from its resting place. Dawn arrived without relief, the mist now a solid white barrier at the town's edge. The cold air carried the scent of damp soil and pine, underscored by a sharp, coppery tang. John waited by their car, his face the color of old bone. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, like old blood. His voice was flat, stripped of all emotion. Roads are closed. Fog's too thick. You'll have to stay. Mark. Closed? We have four-wheel drive. The air grew heavy with the scent of wet earth and something metallic, like old coins. We'll be fine. John's fingers dug into Mark's arm, his voice ragged with desperation. You don't understand. The Guardian is silent this morning. It hasn't accepted the offering. The air hangs heavy with the scent of wet earth and something metallic, the apple untouched. Sarah's gaze fell upon the apple from yesterday. It lay exactly where she'd left it, but now its skin was mottled with deep bruises and patches of decay. The persistent drone of a lone fly circled the rotten fruit, the only sound in the oppressive stillness. A palpable dread had settled over the town, a quiet, suffocating panic that hung thick in the air. People peer from windows, their faces tight with a dread Sarah now recognizes. It's not superstition, it's the terror of a failed protocol. Sarah. What happens if it doesn't accept? John. The mist comes in. It takes someone and unmakes them completely. It leaves nothing but a hollow space where your memory of them once lived. The air grows thick with the scent of ozone and something faintly metallic, like old blood. The stranger, he made a deal. He remains, so we were nothing. But he must choose to stay. We must appease him. The pieces crashed together in Sarah's mind. A metallic scent of old blood and damp stone filled her nostrils. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her limbs were leaden. The offerings weren't tribute. They were bait, lures for a hungry ghost. And it was hungry. Mark's phone buzzed, the screen glowing in the dim room. A cloud photo notification appeared. Memory from 1 year ago today. He tapped it open. A photo loaded, Mark and his friend grinning at a barbecue. The cheerful scene felt wrong, a sickly sweet smell of charcoal and meat suddenly hanging in the air. With their friend, Chris, Sarah stared, Who was Chris? She knew him, but his name was Smoke. The memory of him felt solid in her mind. Yet the word, Chris, evaporated before she could grasp it. A metallic taste coated her tongue, and the air grew thick with the scent of ozone and damp earth. Every attempt to recall him made her thoughts slip away like water through fingers. The familiar became foreign, leaving her paralyzed by this gaping void in her memory. His face was familiar, yet the memory of his laugh, his voice, gone, erased, as if wiped clean from her mind. A metallic scent, like ozone, hung in the air as Sarah's voice trembled, barely a whisper. Sarah. Mark, who took this picture? Mark. I don't know. The forgetting wasn't in the woods. It was here, thick and heavy in the air. It was starting. A creeping dread that numbed their thoughts and stole their memories. They stumbled toward their car, fingers trembling against cold metal keys that felt alien in their hands. The air carried the scent of ozone and decay, a warning their minds could no longer fully grasp. The engine roared to life, but as they sped toward the past, the mist surged forward like a living tide. It flowed across the asphalt, a silent, churning wave that consumed the world in a blinding white void. The car lurched, tires screeching against the wet road before skidding violently and slamming into a ditch with a sickening crunch of metal. Disoriented, they stumbled out into the mist. Cold, clinging, and thick as wool. Shapes moved within it. Not people, but suggestions of people. Their forms indistinct and shifting. They walked with a long, jerking gait, limbs moving in stilted, mechanical motions that defied natural rhythm. From behind them rose the sound of the entire town of Stonehaven, chanting a single, discordant note that vibrated through the damp air. A plea, or perhaps a summoning, echoed through the mist. She turned, the damp chill of the fog clinging to her skin. Through the shifting veil, the town square materialized. The townspeople stood gathered around the ancient shrine, motionless and silent. John's hands weren't empty this time. No apple, no bread. He clutched Mark's forgotten jacket, pulled from the B&B's shadowed closet. The scent of old wool and distant rain clung to the fabric as he stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately, he extended the offering toward the waiting bones. The bones shift, and the skull rotates with a dry, grinding rasp. Those hollow sockets lock onto Sarah's position through the swirling mist from 100 yards away. The screen dissolves into pure, silent white for 3 agonizing seconds. 2 days later, rescuers found Sarah wandering a highway 20 miles distant, hypothermic and in deep shock. Her memory of the town and the road she took had been completely erased. She couldn't remember what happened to Mark. In police footage, an officer interviews a weary, traumatized Sarah. The air in the room carried the sterile scent of bleach and stale coffee. Officer. And your husband, Mark. Any idea where he might be? Sarah's voice was hollow, detached. Who? The search team discovered the rental car abandoned in a remote clearing. The interior was empty, the stale scent of old coffee and cold vinyl hanging in the air. There was no trace of Mark, and no trace of a town called Stonehaven in that sector of the mountains. It was written off as a tragic hiking accident, a mind broken by grief. Final shot. Sarah, months later, in her new apartment in a different city. She's trying to rebuild a life, unpacking the scattered pieces of her past. From within, she retrieves a small object swaddled in brittle newspaper. It's a souvenir, a cheap replica of a quaint miniature gazebo. The metal is cold and carries the faint, metallic scent of forgotten places. She must have purchased the model on her trip before she placed it on her shelf. The camera pushes in slowly on the miniature figure, but sometimes, in the dead of night, Sarah wakes. The air feels thick and carries a faint scent of ozone, a faint scratching scent, like nails on wood, whispers from the direction of the shelf. She doesn't know why she's awake. A primal dread takes hold, rooting her to the bed. Her breath hitches in her throat as she stares into the gloom. She moves to the window, gazing out at the slumbering city lights below. An unexpected, profound gratitude washes over her, a sense of being inexplicably sheltered. She can't articulate why she keeps that peculiar little trinket displayed on her shelf. The silly replica gazebo sits there, holding some unspoken, protective significance. The camera pushes into an extreme close-up on the gazebo's center, revealing a crude mold that faintly suggests a tiny human skeleton. She doesn't wonder who the stranger was that wandered into this forgotten town. She doesn't ask what they promised him, or what twisted hunger he now carries. The air here is thick, with the scent of damp earth and something older. Something that clings to the skin like a cold, forgotten memory. In that moment, she feels utterly secure. The frame locks on the miniature, grimy skeleton. A final, intimate whisper curls directly into the listener's ear. The true horror lies not in what happened, but in what must follow. Which offering was accepted, and whose bones are being tended to at this very moment. The screen plunged into absolute blackness, swallowing the last flicker of light. The sudden void was thick, a palpable pressure against the eyes. A low, electronic hum faded in, the only sound in the oppressive stillness. Then, from the black, a single, wet drip echoed, impossibly loud in the quiet.